liquidity, guys. It's probably the most important thing going on PulseChain. PulseX DEX is perfect for this. You take some of coin A, you take some of coin B, you pair them together. It creates a price chart based on coins going into one pot and coins leaving the other pot, because you're putting something in to take something out. And so because of that relationship of this balance of scales shifting back and forth, you get price movements on the chart. There's probably a simple way to talk about this and educate you on that, but you know that ain't me, and I'm going to make it super complicated. You made it to day 4 of the conference, so I suppose we could go a little bit deeper. Let me share a screen and just like make a simple visual of what this kind of like looks like in the real world. You know, this maybe would be a good starting point. So this here is Matt, you want to throw this up? This is like a example of the price movements in the very, very early days of PulseChain to last year. This must have been May, and then June. So this 0.3 of this 6-wave sequence, this part went into June. So top left, you have PulseChain price action. On the top right, you got incentive. Bottom right, you got PHEX. Bottom left, you got PulseX. They're all doing the same shape, guys. So and the reason is because in the early days and even now, coins that are bonded together the deepest run together. They do the same types of price action, and so this makes trading on PulseChain quite easy to predict and enjoyable and profitable. You know, just even when you're looking for an entry, let's say you're trying to DCA, and Pulse is moving up in this wave from wave 3 to wave 4 sequence, you can look at the relationship on PulseX or Inc. And I'll show you how to do that in a second, and see the percentage differences in those price moves, and kind of game plan around how you best want to strategize getting in or getting out of a position. Because they're just kind of moving as a multiplier of each other based on the routing. So I think maybe the first thing that we could talk about here is routing. I don't know. This is an old slide. These are some old slides. I haven't looked at these in a while, but oh, here's an example of a routing sheet, but it's way too complex for this. So let's just do a new slide. So like if I've got DAI and I want to get wrap Pulse, and I'm just going to bring in like, I don't know, $1,000 of capital, it's going to easily be able to route $1,000 of capital directly from DAI into Pulse. And it's probably only going to hit the DAI Pulse pool. But if I want to bring in like $100,000 or $1 million, like substantial amounts of money, even just $20,000 in some cases, it would be inefficient to just give me Pulse from the main pool, because I'm going to eat more slippage. I'm going to get less Pulse bottom line than if it takes this DAI and it splits it up amongst a bunch of other routes. So what I mean by that is, if I go to one of my favorite routers, app.pateus.io, and I want to do DAI to PLS, let's see if I can get a quote here. $10,000. Okay, so $10,000. It's not even really going to slip the price to like 0.5%. That means if I put in $10,000 of value, I'm going to get $9,965 of value back in Pulse form. And the route that it's going to take is it's going to split my money up into 3 different chunks. 55% of that is going to go directly on that main pair, like I was saying before, DAI to WPLS. But then 30% of that is going to go from DAI into USDT, and then from USDT into WPLS. So what's actually happening here is it's selling my DAI for USDT. So it's buying USDT with DAI, and then it's selling USDT for PLS. So you're selling DAI to sell USDT to finally get PLS in my wallet. So this puts buy pressure on USDT and then sell pressure on USDT right after that. And then the pulse price goes up. And then, so that's like how these routes work. And this is why these slides do this phenomenon of bonded liquidity, is because when you're pushing money through the ecosystem, it's going to route your order through all these different pairs to get to fill you for the best price. That's what these aggregators are doing. So that's how you get these coins to move up and down together, is because they're constantly being bought for that to get to the end coin. So routing is a key component here. So let's change the numbers here a little bit and do like if I was going to bring $1 million in to PLS and see how it changes the route, if it can even quote me on this. Might not be able to quote me because it's just number too big. Yeah, it's just probably too big of a number. By the way, I wouldn't recommend doing $1 million market buy because it's inefficient. If you're going to be coming in with buys and sells, you want to be coming in like chunks. So like even just $100,000 market buy of PLS, it only slips the price 1%. That's pretty good order execution. Now this game it's really interesting when you start rotating from one thing to another. So for example, like ink to pulse, if I was going to sell $300,000 of ink into pulse, it's 1.6% slippage. So I can actually effectively get better order execution on ink to pulse with 300 grand than I probably would be able to get with DAI to pulse. Pateus, lock it in for me, bud. So when you're looking for these relationships and charts, I suppose you can actually see the shape of the chart structure on some of these coins, and you can actually see the structure in the coins themselves. So I have this example here with the Axis Alive chart from very, very early on. I'm going to try and do my best to just paint the picture quick. So like you had this curved structure to start, and we're going to be comparing it to Hexfire, because in the beginning, Hexfire and Axis were deeply paired together with like $500,000 of liquidity back when that was a lot of liquidity on the chain. So they had this curved structure, big blow off, triangle structure, double top, like horns, sell off, curve down. This same structure now, you're going to see it in the Hexfire chart. So if I go to this page, you get that curved structure, the blow off, some form of a triangle, and then the double top, double horns, the breakdown, and then the curve. And the reason why this chart structure is literally pound for pound the same as the Axis chart is because their deepest pairs was with each other. And so they were like twins that rode up and down in price together because all of the orders was being routed through them to get to the pulse. Whether pulse was coming into the two assets or leaving, the orders were trying to seek the best deal, whether you're buying one of the two coins with pulse or whether you're selling one of the two coins for pulse. It would split those orders up amongst those different pools. So that's Hart's law. That's bonded liquidity. That's routing in a nutshell. In terms of actually seeing that in other charts, you can see that here as well. Let me delete some stuff out. This is just the regular Pulse WPLS chart. We just kind of showed this relationship before. Breakdown, bear flag, SEC crash, and then this broadening wedge structure, and then another bear flag of sorts, and then like this long shoot sell-off channel. You get that same exact relationship in PLSX as well, where, it's literally the same exact thing. First sell-off. So there's a little bit of a variation of a structure. SEC crash, built this like broadening wedge, big bear flag, and then the descending channel, the shoot. So it literally did the same thing. And this is because Pulse and PulseX are super bonded together. So they're going to practically do the same thing. So to get like resolution on the trading aspect of this, you actually have to dig a little bit deeper into the ratios. So like we've been looking at charts against the dollar here for the most part so far. And that's useful for PLS specifically, because WPLS is our native coin. And so you're going to need to look at the dollar chart for that. That makes a lot of sense. But then in terms of like, what's the measure of success on PulseChain? It's how well is your coin or a coin performing in Pulse terms. So in the case here of PulseX, like when we're looking at this bonded liquidity setup, the dollar charts look relatively the same, but how do we tell which one's over underperforming the other ones? Well, we can change this right scale to not show us the price in dollar terms, but give us the price in Pulse terms by clicking this button right here. This is Dex Screener, and Dex Tools has the same button. And what it does is it redenominates the chart. So you got like, when I say redenominate, you got Pulse X is the numerator divided by USD. That's the denominator. So when we denominate things in Pulse terms, you're going to see quite a different picture. So, boom. This is a lot different looking than what we just looked at. This is now you're looking at this the scale is now in how much PLS is one PLSX worth? And the answer to that question is it's worth 0.42 PLS. So, not quite 2 to 1. A 0.5 here would be 2 to 1, which is where I think this chart's heading. As a technical analyst, I think that PulseX will easily come back up here to the highs and be worth, for every 2 PulseX, you'll have 1 PLS of value. And it could even go higher as the cycle progresses because of its deflationary nature and the tokenomics there. So when we're looking at like, well, how much is PLS like overperforming Pulse? Well, the way to find that out is to like, well, let's pick a date. And so if we go back to if we're viewing this chart in Pulse terms, maybe we can go back to the PLS chart and we could pick a date that we look like, hey, that's a pretty significant date. I might want to know what happened there. So let's use this point here where you can see clearly the price just ejected off that level and then ran up to this wick high. And I'm going to measure that out from the lows to the highs and see, well, how much percent change was that? And the answer is that was a 308% move against the dollar. So 308% move against the dollar, that's pretty good. What did it do in PulseX terms? How much did the PulseX, I'm going to go back to the dollar chart for a second, just for to make this example really clear, and measure from that same point on January 7th to the peak. PulseX went up 659%. So, I mean, obviously this is clear that it's about a 2 to 1 ratio. 308%, 659%. PulseX went 2x higher than Pulse did. Now, if I go into the WPLS chart, it should do the difference between the two, because this is basically, that's all that this is doing. January 7th to the peak, 87%. So almost that 100% difference between 300% and 600%. This is saying here, based on these 2 touch points, that PulseX overperformed Pulse in Pulse terms by 87%. So it's just shy of a 2x. It's doing 2x better in terms of this particular price move. So then you can extrapolate that out to any coin to see, how is this coin performing against the other coins in the ecosystem. And it gets really fun when you start diving down deeper into like altcoins versus altcoins and stuff and trying to find edge in the market. So this chart here, I don't know if this probably doesn't look familiar to anybody. If I click on the USD chart, this is ink in dollar terms on the log chart. And from that same point, on January 7th to the peak, this did a 23x, 2200%, which should be, how many more x's is that than 300%? 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. It's like a 7x difference. So let's double check the PLS pair or denomination and check that same price move out from this 7th. So it's like a 7x exact, 599%. It's basically 600%, which is a 7x. So Inc went 7x harder than Pulse did. So Pulse went 300%. PulseX went 650%. Inc went 2200%, or in this case, 600% harder than Pulse did. So the way that worked was, money was flowing like into Pulse, Inc, and Hex, but because of the liquidity dynamics, Inc was lighter and had less overhead pressure, and that's why you got that upside potential. You got that extra upside that you didn't get in Pulse, for example. And a lot of that could have looked like this, where a lot of people had PLS, even more people had PLSX, but they sold the bottom, and so there wasn't as much overhead pressure, or there was more incoming volume, during that one final sack pump, to push that up there to give it some extra, juice. And then Inc, which like nobody sacked for, that had just a metric crap ton of people, despising it at the lows. And so the whole market was kind of offsides. And so this was like the least distributed. This was probably the most distributed, but had some extra juice pumped into it. And this was like, I guess you could say, the balancing act. But yeah, when it came to, why did Inc overperform? Well, in a lot of cases, PulseX was being sold into to get Inc. And so like if somebody was going, Pulse to Inc, some of it would have went Pulse to Inc directly. Some of it would have went Pulse to PulseX to Inc. So you would have pumped PulseX in the process of pumping Inc, because you would have sold Pulse for PulseX, and then used PulseX to buy Inc. So this put buy pressure on PulseX and it put buy pressure on Inc. So it gives this amplifier effect where different pairings can amplify each other. And a really good example of that recently was the Axis pump to $100,000. Believe it or not, this coin did go hit a high of $98,000 on the 10th of April. And this is a 4-hour chart. And from the lows on April 8th to the highs, it did a 472% move. And I believe there was somewhere in the order of 2 billion to 3 billion pulse paired up with Axis during this period. Whereas Hex Fire did not have that much pulse attached to it. So there was less weight on it, but it still had a tight bond to Axis. So on this one, it actually went up 43x in the same time frame that Axis only went up 472%, so 5.7x. So because there was a strong bond between Axis and Fire, and there was a weak bond to WPLS here and a strong bond to WPLS here, when there's orders routing through here, whatever money did get pushed through Fire to get to the pulse pair would amplify the Fire and take less pulse out. So it's like a chain link that, and part of this equation as well was Solid X, where Solid X was getting pumped like crazy during this period as well. And so this was like a triple bond. It's almost like atoms. There's like a triple bonded with tons of liquidity between these, and this had a huge pulse pair. So like these were getting a lot of the volume in the action, But because there was a shortage of pulse while things were going parabolic, it kept tapping that fire pool and amplifying the pump on fire because less pulse was getting taken out and just getting deposited in there to get to back to SolidX, because people were selling their PLS to get to SolidX. They were selling their PLS to get to Axis. And so the only way to get some Axis or SolidX was through fire, so that sometimes their pulse would hit the fire pulse pool, then to go to fire and SolidX. And so they were pumping fire on the way to get the Axis and SolidX through the order router. And that's what allowed, you know, fire to do a 43x in the same time frame as Axis only did like a 5.4x. And this is the magic of bonded liquidity, guys. And when you have thoughtful ecosystems out there like Sunny D's ecosystem, or the Tang Gang's ecosystem, like they're smart and they're getting smarter. The SolidX, the Solid Index, Atropa, can't forget Atropa. These communities are getting smarter at how they're deploying their liquidity across the liquidity webs to help amplify the token performance on different tokens at different times under different conditions. So this is bonded liquidity, guys. Moxie says, can I talk about the value of having a Debank Web3 ID on onboarding? Yeah, I guess it would be a call to action for everybody that, you know, Debank is, you know, you don't have to, I guess, first caution, you know, Debank is a place where you can you can plug in like a public address, and then your portfolio comes for display, and it's like Twitter. You can make posts, and it's monetizing, like it's like Twitter that's monetized and actually connects to a portfolio, which you can basically dox or not dox your, you know, your holdings. You can look at transactions on there. It's a great tool made by the Rabby team to look deeper into the blockchain. It's pretty good for chain analytics and trying to track movements on the chain and following other people. And so what, you know, I think the goal there with Debank is that we expose all of crypto. I mean, there's accounts on there with millions of dollars or even billions of dollars in some cases that could learn about and find out about PulseChain for the first time. And I know, like, one of the strategies going around right now is talking about these P copies that are on PulseChain, and what a good look it is if they just like find a post of some guy from PulseChain that's got, like, you know, 500 grand in his wallet that says, hey, you know, by the way, there's all these P copies on PulseChain that have all this value in them. And then they click on the guy's wallet and he's got, you know, $500,000 of P Ave in there. Like, that's a pretty good look for the chain, and it's a good way to get eyes on it. And I think there's a group of guys that's actually taken the initiative to set up like a PulseChain club inside of there. So if you're interested in that, go take a look at debank.com. I think it's a good way to bring attention and awareness to PulseChain.